The scarf still smelled like her, faint jasmine and rain. I told myself it was just fabric, that I wasn't driving back to her house at 11:47 p.m. because of her. It was just the polite thing to do. Return what wasn't mine. Keep things simple. Keep things clean. But when she opened the door, barefoot and surprised, the night didn't feel simple anymore. "Hey," I said, holding out the scarf like proof of my good intentions. She smiled the kind of smile that didn't need words. "You could have waited till morning." "Yeah," I said, and didn't move. There was a pause, not awkward but charged, like the air between us had been waiting for something neither of us planned to say. Her hair was slightly undone, the soft kind of messy that happens when someone's been half asleep and half thinking too much. She wore a thin sweater that hung loose at the shoulder, exposing skin that caught the hallway light. The scarf slipped from my hand before I could think. She bent to pick it up, and I did too, and for half a second, our fingers brushed. It was nothing. It was everything. She looked up at me, still crouched, and something in her eyes made my stomach tighten, not seduction, not invitation, just recognition. Like she saw something familiar in me, something she tried to forget years ago. "Come in," she said softly. Her living room smelled like old books and warm tea. A record hummed low somewhere, the kind of instrumental music that makes silence feel too close. I stood awkwardly near the doorway, not sure where to put my hands or my thoughts. "You've always been polite," she said, folding the scarf slowly, smoothing out every wrinkle. "Most people just text." "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. The scarf was on my chair. It felt wrong to keep it. She gave a small laugh, not mocking, just tired. "You make returning a scarf sound like a confession." Maybe it was. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of glances, of unsaid things. She moved closer, the soft fabric brushing my wrist as she placed the folded scarf on the table. Her perfume lingered, subtle but unshakable. "You shouldn't drive this late," she said. "I don't mind." Her gaze lingered on me, longer than it should have. She looked at me as if she was remembering something she shouldn't. The clock ticked softly in the background, 12:02 now. Midnight had arrived quietly, like it was eavesdropping. She reached for the light switch near the sofa but didn't turn it off. "You want tea?" "Sure." She turned toward the kitchen, and for a moment I almost followed. But something held me still, the weight of that almost touch, the unfinished look in her eyes. From the kitchen came the sound of boiling water, the clink of cups. I noticed her coat draped over the chair, her reading glasses left open beside a half-finished book. She lived alone, I realized, and somehow that felt heavier than silence. When she came back with 2 cups, her sweater had slipped lower. She didn't fix it right away. "Here," she said, handing me one. Our fingers brushed again, this time slower, deliberate or accidental, I couldn't tell. "Thank you," I murmured. "Don't thank me yet," she said softly, setting her cup down. I looked up, confused, curious, and then came the sound. A knock. Sharp. Sudden. At her front door. She froze. For a long second, the world stopped, the clock, the rain, even the air between us. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Don't say anything." And just like that, the night shifted, from something innocent to something neither of us would be able to explain later. The knock faded, leaving a strange quiet in its wake. Whoever it was didn't wait long. Just 3 knocks, then footsteps retreating down the hall. She didn't move at first. Just stood there, staring at the door like she was waiting for it to open again. When she finally turned to me, her face softened, not with relief, but with something older. Something like exhaustion. "Sorry," she said, forcing a smile. "Neighbor, probably. He forgets which door is his sometimes." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled when she reached for her tea. I noticed, she knew I noticed, and neither of us said anything. We sat down. She in her corner of the couch, me on the edge, pretending to be comfortable. The record kept playing, low and steady, like it had decided to ignore the tension in the room. She stared into her cup. You remind me of someone, she said finally. Someone I used to know a long time ago. Was he? I began, then stopped. She smiled faintly. He was kind. Too kind. Didn't last. There was something fragile in her tone, not regret exactly, but something that lived close to it. I leaned back, pretending not to think too hard about it. I guess I get that a lot, I said lightly, though my chest tightened. Her eyes lifted to mine. Do you? The question hung between us. It wasn't playful. It was searching. I looked away, tracing the rim of my cup. Not really, I admitted. I think people just assume I don't notice things. That I'm harmless. Her lips curved. Are you? The question felt heavier than it should have. I'm not sure anymore, I said quietly. A pause. The kind that fills a room like smoke. When she reached for the scarf on the table, her hand brushed my knee, barely, but it sent a jolt through me that I tried, and failed, to ignore. She folded the scarf again even though it was already neat. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as if the act itself was helping her think. You shouldn't be here, she murmured. I know. Then why are you? I didn't have an answer that would make sense. Not to her. Not to myself. Her gaze met mine, steady, unflinching. People will talk, she said softly. You're what, 22? 24. Still. She looked away. I'm not who you think I am. Maybe not, I said, but I'm here anyway. She gave a quiet, breathless laugh, not from amusement, but disbelief. You say that like you don't understand what it means. I don't, I admitted. But I want to. That was when she stilled. The scarf slipped again, and this time she didn't reach for it. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath against my cheek. Close enough to smell the faint trace of jasmine again. Her hand rested on my shoulder, light, uncertain. Don't, she whispered. But she didn't move. And neither did I. For a long moment, the world outside didn't exist, not the time, not the rules, not the lines we both knew were there. Just that quiet space between her hand and my heartbeat. Then she pulled back, slowly, like waking from a dream she didn't want to end. Midnight's over, she said softly. You should go. I stood, but she didn't walk me to the door. When I turned to leave, she was still sitting there, one hand on the scarf, eyes lowered, as if she was holding something far more fragile than fabric. And I knew then, leaving wouldn't make it easier. It would only make coming back harder. 3 days passed before I saw her again. I told myself I wouldn't, that it was better if what happened that night stayed a blur of warmth and silence. But fate, or maybe coincidence, had its own sense of humor. She was at the cafe near campus, sitting by the window, reading the same book she'd left open on her table that night. I almost walked past. Almost. But she looked up right as I did, and her expression flickered, surprise, then something softer. You found me, she said when I walked in. I didn't mean to. Maybe that's worse, she murmured. We sat across from each other. She in her usual quiet composure, me pretending to be fine. The air between us felt tighter in daylight, no shadows to hide behind, just truth and hesitation. How's your sleep? She asked. Uneven. Her lips curved slightly. Mine too. We both smiled at that, a small, dangerous smile. A friend of mine walked in then, calling my name from across the cafe. My heart jumped. Her hand brushed my wrist beneath the table, light but firm. A warning. Don't, she whispered under her breath. I stayed still. My friend waved, laughed, and went to the counter. I could feel her hand trembling against mine before she let go. That was close, I said quietly. She looked out the window. You shouldn't be seen here with me. Why not? Because people talk, she said flatly. And I'm tired of being a story in someone else's mouth. I wanted to tell her I didn't care. But the way she said it, tired, quiet, final, made me swallow the words. The cafe felt too bright, too loud. We left together but walked separately until we reached the street corner. She stopped. You still have that scarf, don't you? I nodded. I didn't want to bring it back. Her eyes softened. Keep it then. There was traffic noise, the smell of rain on concrete, her hair brushing against her cheek in the wind. She looked so effortlessly human that I forgot to breathe for a second. You shouldn't look at me like that, she said, voice barely audible. Like what? Like you're about to do something you'll regret. I took a step closer, not enough to touch, but enough for the air to thicken between us. Maybe regret isn't the worst thing, I said. She exhaled, a sound caught between laughter and a sigh. Her eyes met mine, open, searching, afraid. You don't know what you're asking for. Then tell me. Her hand rose halfway, as if to touch my face, but she stopped herself. The pause stretched, filled with everything we weren't saying. I could hear her breathing, shallow, uncertain. Someone's coming, she whispered suddenly. We stepped apart just as a coworker of hers turned the corner, calling her name. She smiled quickly, the kind of practiced, polite smile that hides everything real. I pretended to check my phone. The moment passed, but not really. When her coworker left, we stood there, pretending the world hadn't just nearly caught us. She turned back to me, eyes unsteady. We need to stop. I nodded. We both know we won't. Her silence was the closest thing to an answer. A raindrop hit her shoulder. She didn't flinch. And then, for the briefest second, she leaned in, not enough to kiss, just enough to make my heart forget how to beat. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "This can't keep happening." But her eyes said it already had. I didn't hear from her for days. Not a message, not a glance. The silence became its own kind of noise. Then, one morning, a text, "Can we talk?" I didn't think. I just went. She met me at the same cafe, early this time, before anyone else arrived. Her eyes were tired, her hair tied back, but something about her posture told me she'd made a decision. You remember that night? She asked. I haven't forgotten a second of it. She nodded, eyes on her coffee. You shouldn't have seen that call. I didn't look at the name. I know, she said quietly. But I need to tell you who it was. Something in her tone made my chest tighten. It was my ex-husband. I blinked. I didn't know you were separated. Not divorced. She let out a shaky breath. We've been circling the end for years. He calls when he remembers I exist. She looked at me then, directly, painfully honest. That night, when you came to the office, I thought it would be fine. Harmless. But then, her words trailed off. I shouldn't have touched you, she said finally. Then why did you? Her eyes glistened. Because I wanted to remember what it felt like to be wanted. The honesty hit harder than anger could have. I sat back, silent, watching her hand tremble as she reached for her cup. She didn't drink, just held it, as if warmth alone could steady her. I've built my life on being careful, she whispered. And you make that impossible. The cafe door opened, a gust of cold air, a man's voice calling her name. Her colleague again. He smiled, waved, asked if she was free for lunch. She smiled back, polite as ever. Maybe later. He left. But her mask didn't come back this time. When she turned to me again, her eyes were wet. You shouldn't wait for me, she said. I'm not waiting, I said. I'm already here. She let out a sound, half a laugh, half a sob, and stood abruptly. As she passed me, her shoulder brushed mine. She stopped. Then, without turning around, she said, If you come tonight, don't knock, and walked out. The cup she'd held still steamed faintly on the table. My heart didn't know whether to follow her or stay behind. But one thing was certain, there was no going back now. Her apartment door was already unlocked. I hesitated, hand hovering over the frame, pulse loud in my ears. She hadn't texted again, just those words, don't knock. When I stepped inside, the lights were low, the rain outside whispering against the glass. She stood by the window, her back to me, wrapped in a thin shawl that caught the soft lamplight. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, without turning, "You came. I shouldn't have." "I know." The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was alive, pulsing, magnetic, waiting. She turned then, slowly. Her eyes looked tired, but there was something fierce beneath the calm, the kind of emotion that comes only when you've tried to resist too long. "I told myself I wouldn't let you back in," she said. "And yet—" her voice broke off. I took a step closer. She didn't move away. Her shawl slipped slightly from her shoulder. I reached out, almost instinctively, to fix it, but my fingers brushed her skin instead. Warm. Real. She caught my wrist gently. "Don't." I froze. Her hand lingered there, not pushing me away, not pulling me closer. Just staying. "You think this means something pure," she whispered. "It doesn't. It's loneliness. It's timing. It's me trying to remember how it felt to want without fear." I swallowed hard. "Maybe that's what makes it real." She met my gaze, eyes shining. "You don't understand what it costs me." "I think I do." Her breath hitched, soft, audible. She looked down at our hands, still tangled together, and said, almost to herself, "You're too young to know what regret feels like." "Then show me," I said. That made her look up again. Really look. And something shifted. The distance, the years, all the reasons not to, they all collapsed into that single heartbeat where neither of us moved, but everything did. Her lips parted like she might speak, but no words came. I could feel the warmth of her breath now, the tremor in her fingers, the tiny catch in her throat when I whispered, "So you don't want this?" She didn't. Her eyes fluttered closed. I felt her lean in just enough for the world to blur around us. The rain, the ticking clock, everything but the space between our mouths. Then, just before our lips met, she pulled back. Barely. But enough. She rested her forehead against mine, trembling. "If we start this," she whispered, "we won't stop. And I'll be the one who ruins you." I smiled faintly. "Maybe you'll save me instead." A quiet laugh escaped her, half broken. Her hand came up to my chest, feeling the rhythm there, too fast, too real. "I can't promise anything," she murmured. "Then promise me nothing," I said. And for the first time, she didn't resist. Her eyes opened, steady, raw, and she exhaled the kind of breath that sounded like surrender. Then, softly, she said, "Stay." Not a command. Not an invitation. Just truth. And in that moment, we both understood, this wasn't about age or rules or fear anymore. It was about two people who had stopped pretending they didn't feel what they did. No guarantees. No future. Just now. And that, somehow, was enough. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It whispered against the windows like it didn't want to wake us. She sat at the edge of the couch, hair loose, wrapped in the same shawl from the night before. The lamplight was off now, only gray dawn spilling across her face, softening everything sharp. Neither of us said much. There was no need to. The silence felt different this time, not heavy, not tense, just full. I handed her a cup of coffee. She smiled faintly, eyes still half asleep. "You stayed. You asked me to." She nodded, a little embarrassed by her own words. "I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I could leave," I said quietly. For a moment, she looked at me the way she had that first night, cautious, curious, unsure if she was allowed to feel what she felt. Then something in her face softened, as if she'd stopped fighting herself. "You make it sound simple," she said. "It doesn't have to be complicated." She laughed quietly, like someone who knew better but wanted to believe anyway. "Everything about this is complicated." I shrugged. "Maybe that's what makes it real." Her eyes lingered on me then, steady and warm. She reached out, fingertips tracing the edge of my hand, slow, hesitant, but sure. "I used to think love was supposed to look a certain way," she said. Same age, same stage of life, people who make sense together. And now? She smiled, tired but genuine. Now I think love just looks like two people who stop pretending they don't need each other. I didn't answer. I just turned my hand over and let her fingers slide into mine. Her palm was warm, a quiet kind of warmth that felt more like trust than fire. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. I could feel the weight of her exhale, slow and steady, like she was finally letting go of something that had been sitting on her chest for years. I was afraid, she said softly, of what people would think, of what I'd think of myself. I brushed my thumb along her knuckles. And now? She smiled into my sleeve. Now I'm just tired of being afraid. The rain outside eased into a soft drizzle. Somewhere, a clock ticked, marking the first real morning we'd ever shared. We sat there for a long time, no promises, no plans, just the quiet sound of two people who had finally stopped running from what was already theirs. When she finally lifted her head, I kissed her forehead, not out of impulse, but understanding. She smiled. That's better than I imagined. Good, I whispered. Because I'm out of words. Her hand tightened around mine, gentle but firm. Then don't say anything. We didn't. We just stayed there, together, while the day began quietly outside, like the world had decided to start over, too.